Dzień dobry Państwu.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are beginning the part related to new sources of Polish economy development. I'm going to moderate this session. I'm Maciej Głogowski. But before I give some details, I would like to announce Andrzej Domański, the Minister of Finance. That will be a warm-up for the minister. Let's welcome him with a round of applause. Those of you who are standing at the back can take their seats. And over to the minister. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much for having me. The Freedom Games, for me, are the most important event of the conference autumn and the space for discussions both here as well as in the 6th district. We are discussing Polish economy, its model, growth model, and the development sources in the upcoming decades. At first glance, the economic situation looks positive. The dynamics of our economic development is unprecedented. Looking at the perspective of the last 35 years, we can proudly say that our economy is an example of a great transformation success. Between 1990 and 2023, our GDP per capita in a real approach increased over 3 times. Our economic growth in this period was the fastest in the region and globally. We know what the success is based on. Courageous reforms whose authors are here with us, the spirit of Polish entrepreneurship, and Poland joining the EU. During the 2 decades, we gained the funds for modernization of infrastructure and access to new technologies. But even more importantly, our companies gained access to shared market. Our economy is the 6th largest EU economy, and considering the purchase force parity, it's the largest growth engine. Despite the slowdown in our trade partner, meaning Germany, Poland has been the fastest growing large EU economy. According to forecasts, the growth rate will reach 4%. But it's not all a bed of roses. The economic growth engines are slowing down or become less relevant for the upcoming challenges. We're not going to access the EU again. Currently, the indicators which used to be low are high. The entrepreneurship spirit has remained, but the facts are that Polish companies invest and the risk aversion is at a high level. The peace dividend, which provided funds for some indispensable expenditures for the economic growth in 22 was cancelled. We spent over 4% of our GDP now, and next year it's going to be 4.7%. This is the highest expenditure among all NATO member states. But military hazards are not the only hazards. We need to see the changes in the economic dynamics. Instead of acceleration of globalization, we refer to economy safety, and the increasing protectionism changes the global supply chains. Free trade gives room to active trade policy. Consequently, we have observed fragmentarization of global economy. Europe needs to do its homework in relation to getting free or independent of the Russian resources, because we know what economic and geopolitical effects it exerts. We must not commit this same error when it comes to the supplies of critical minerals. As Europe, we must not be dependent on a selected export market, because they are often located in authoritarian regimes. We can see increased international tensions leading to relocation of some investments. From Poland's point of view, this trend is positive. We are beneficiaries of nearshoring and similar processes, but they are not given once and for all. Thirdly, in my opinion, and most importantly, the EU has started a difficult debate on getting out of its comfort zone. The discussion is initiated by Draghi's report devoted to competitiveness of the European economy. Draghi's report evokes discussions and emotions because of the painful but valid diagnosis and naming the challenges ahead of us. We fail in the global technological race with the EU as well as South Eastern Asia, considering, for instance, energy transition, demographic changes, or new geopolitical conditions. The Draghi's report is the premise for our wake-up call, and we should start taking decisive measures. Our social and economic model will no longer exist. The major ailment of the EU is a lack of economic growth. It might seem obvious, but we need to accept that for many decision makers in the EU, the economic growth is only a side product, a byproduct of wise politics. We need to say it openly. We won't have green economy and sufficient funds for security purposes or cohesion, social cohesion funds if the European economy falls into economic agony. The economic growth should be the priority in the context of all policies we carry out. The data related to European investments are cruel. Before the 2008 crisis, the EU has increased its investment expenditure by 30%, while in Europe it was less than 10%. Additionally, Europe missed a huge technological leap. We did not develop big techs. Only Microsoft has its market value twice higher than 40 largest German DAX index companies. In my opinion, it shows the problems that the European economy will need to face. Our economic growth in Poland does not match this disastrous landscape presented in Draghi's report, but we need to say it openly. Our economic growth must not be based only on consumption. The real expenditure in Polish economy will increase by 9%. It boosts retail, and we are happy about it. But we notice we still miss investments. Today we are in a city whose history has taught for over 200 years that development should not be taken for granted, that the development might end as quickly as it started. Failing to notice the reality might lead to digress. The Maja Zdanowska could definitely say how much effort we need to overcome the problems related to economic breakdown and deindustrialization. But Łódź is an example of a city which left the digress trend owing to wise decisions. As I have mentioned, we're fully aware that our competitive advantages have been exhausting and that our economic growth model should be corrected. Poles have become wealthier and with high inspiration, so we need to support knowledge-based economy. In order to achieve it, the major challenge that Poland needs to face is related to we need to remember that energy transition will be the foundation of our economic growth. Implementing the changes in Polish power engineering sector will help reduce energy prices and improve economy competitiveness, but will become the engine for further development. We pay for gas and consequently electricity a dozen or so times more than in the USA or other Western European countries. If Europe wants to compete in the technological race, it needs to ensure stable and cheap energy. This is what the largest digital companies are aware of. Already now, they have invested in nuclear technologies. We are in the freedom games. Recently, we learned the names of the Nobel Prize winners in economy. So I would like to quote what the book Narrow Corridor states, indicating that the prerequisite for stable economic growth is the freedom. In addition to stable market institutions, trade, investments, they guarantee innovation and continuous improvement of productivity. They are possible only in the conditions of freedom. But the freedom must be accompanied by equal opportunities. Freedom and equal opportunities give hope for development, because only in such a society everybody can pursue their aspirations, create innovation, and change their status. Today, during the Freedom Games in Łódź, I can fully declare that the Ministry of Finance and the entire ruling coalition will work for the conditions to run business in Poland should improve and that the freedom zone expands. One of the manifestations of such a standpoint is the recent reform of local government's finances. We have nearly completed it. It should only be signed by the president. And we have improved the freedom of spending the resources. The list of challenges and hazards to be faced by our economy can be enumerated, but that's not the point. The point is not to auction, but to look for solutions that we'll have to implement. We must not be slumbered by the good condition of the Polish economy. It will not be measured in quarters, years, but in decades. Thank you. Thank you, Minister, for the introduction and for announcing the topics of our discussion panel. Now I would like to invite my panelists. Ewa Balcerowicz. Let's welcome our panelists with a round of applause. Maciej Bukowski, Szymon Midera, and Paweł Wojciechowski. I will tell you when to applaud, and without any further ado, take your seats. The last seat is for me. Just as a warm-up, a question that won't surprise you, I would like each of you to introduce yourselves. 10 seconds. That's the easiest question in this panel. Okay, let me start. I've got 2 legs. One leg is from the Center of Social Analysis. I established this organization in 1991 with several colleagues of mine, and for a few years now I've been the president of the Foundation Council. And the second leg is the Society of Polish Economists, where I am the deputy president for the 7th year. Maciej Bukowski. I also have 2 legs, and I have always had. I work at the Warsaw University Faculty of Economic Sciences. I work at the chair of Economic History. Now I focus on the economic development of Poland over centuries. And moreover, for many years, I've been a professional think tankers. And now I am the president of 2 institutions. So perhaps it's time for a change. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I also have 2 legs. I am the president of the board at PKO, Polish Bank. I started in mBank in Łódź. I had my own business focusing on a pan-European e-commerce model. I'll surprise you because I have more than 2 legs. I am like a spider or octopus operating in various spaces. I love chasing clowns and unobvious effects. I suppose it's underappreciated function in the economy. We should consider what the results of economic policies are. Okay, so we've got some minutes for discussion. It was good that we had this introduction. The minister mentioned some topics, and some of them were quite natural for us, including energy transition, which must not be neglected. This year's Nobel in Economy actually should be granted last year. Then we could remember how important the institutions of the state of law are. The first association that comes to your mind when we are supposed to discuss the new sources of Polish economy development, what are they? Thank you very much for this question. When I got the invitation, I started wondering what new sources we can mention. So I thought it's about innovation. But I wanted to make our discussion more orderly. There is no such thing as new sources. There are only old sources. The topic applies to the development of Polish economy, meaning long-term economic development and qualitative changes that should improve the life of inhabitants. It is boosted by quantitative multiplication of goods, which can be easily measured. Typically, we observe what happens to GDP. We also know from theory that interrupted economic development is the worst thing, meaning first we have quick growth and then crisis. We should all be concerned about long-lasting growth, which should progress smoothly. What are the sources of economic development and economic growth? According to theory, there are 4 of them, including labor, natural resources, which seem less important, but once we include the condition of environment, it's important, and the capital, including tangible, human, and financial. And the 4th one are technologies, meaning what we dream of. Poland should be the state of innovation, not only based on capital and labor, but also should include innovation. Having said it all, I would like to refer to the accomplishments of Nobel Prize winners, meaning we need to remember the economic system and its nature. We can have lots of capital, but also waste it if we do not use these factors effectively. So consequently, we've got 2 extreme economic systems, meaning socialism and capitalism. There is no point mentioning socialism, as we know the story behind it and why it was wrong. When it comes to capitalism, there are various aspects and the range, but private property is important because it determines the capitalistic system.
W gruncie rzeczy, jak się
And without it, if we follow the literature and history, without it, there is no democracy. So private property is necessary. Democracy and welfare, economic welfare, will not happen without these 2 factors. To make sure that the capitalism economy based on the private property functions properly, there must be competition. So the economy must be open. It has to undergo international trade. Investments in the country also have to be allowed, and there has to be an inside competition, because we do not want to have monopolies that could have very negative impacts. We've heard a very interesting speech by Minister. It was very interesting. He has indicated the actions taken now and planned for future. I would like to add, although the institutions have been undermined, and despite poor economy in the last 8 years, we still have economic growth. The main factors, in a way, compensated for this inappropriate economic policy. We also had a big inflow of Ukrainians who have supported our labor market. It also happened before the war in 2021. Now we are facing new challenges. Some factors have come to the end. The list of problems was very interesting. What I was missing in the list, something we really have to face internally, not at the EU level, demonopolization in the power sector. So we've got monopolies in terms of supplies of gas, energy. There will be also destination of the public finance, and I know that the government are already working on this. We also have to undergo the reform of the taxation system. It has been really undermined. I must watch the time, so I'm sorry I was hurrying you up. So you've provided some additional points that should be discussed. But in the second round of this question, when we are talking about the new sources of economy, now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Bukowski. We can take an historical approach. analyzing economic growth within the last 100 or even 200 years. So Poland had episodes of accelerated growth. I mean, the year 1870. So for 40 years, the growth was increasing due to industrialization. Then the first 50 years of the 20th century were very hard, but even the Second Republic of Poland was managing the problems. And the Polish People Republic was doing quite well. Of course, the growth was not that great, but still the growth occurred. So the growth rate was about 2%. In 1975, it was about 3%. So these were not the great results if we compare our results to Greece, Portugal, or Spain, where they had 4% growth. So, when we talk about the Third Republic of Poland, the growth is above 4%. So it's a very good decade if we observe the last years. Our region has reached the point where many difficult events that took place within the past 200 years disappeared. So we could use the same assets as the assets used by the developed countries. So education that was wasted before due to the socialistic approaches. So the education started working very well. It wasn't just in Poland, it was in the Central Europe, also in Russia, whose development was also quite good. Ukraine faced a failure, and Ukraine didn't manage to use the advantages. All the other systems did quite well. So Poland was not an exceptional country. I don't like saying that Poland has been so wonderful, so great, but it made a good use of the globalization. But what next? Well, in the future, I don't think we will have an exceptional events. Poland has exactly the same advantages and disadvantages as other countries. On one hand, we've got demography. We know that the demography will deteriorate within the next few years, but demography is not only Polish problem. All European countries, all the northern hemisphere countries will have these problems, and it sounds that young generations do not want to have children. There are lots of single women who have no children, and I don't think we can do anything about it. Maybe we need a cultural change, but this is not something for the politicians. So we can only use the capacity offered by the immigrants. So now I'm listening to our politicians who become very skeptical towards immigration. But maybe it's the fact. If we do not cope, however, if we do not become open to immigrants, maybe we need some solutions how to control the immigrations. If we do not do it, maybe we will lose this opportunity. Polish society will age very quickly and we will not be successful. Okay, I would like to give the floor to the next speakers. You're the president of the bank, so I think you will be talking about technology, artificial intelligence. Well, I'm going to talk about three elements. Financing for the armed industry based on the new technologies, especially foreign expansion of the Polish companies and energy transition. So these are the elements of the new sources of development, right? Minister has said that after the start of the war, actually the dividend of peace was taken away from us. We can search for some geopolitical opportunities. We have some examples of this time, both in Europe and in the world. I would like to talk about the Western Germany after the end of World War II, Marshall's Plan, and not only South Korea or Israel. These examples show that we have a huge opportunity to have very modern armed industry based on new technologies, and it could become the driving engine for investments. Nowadays, Poland is ranked in Bloomberg's Reuters rankings. Poland is ranked as the first country in Europe, in the first 5 in the world, as the country for nearshoring. So we are a place to locate under the new economic order. We are identified, Poland is identified as number 1. So we have to do everything to make sure that we use these opportunities. So you recommend the energy transition, right? This transition, on the one hand, is our necessity. We've already heard about it. We have the highest prices for electricity. So it's not only that we have to implement the transition plan, we have to change the energy mix. There's a debate on this, and we also have to accelerate this process not to lose our competitiveness. So this is the necessity. This is also a huge opportunity for economic growth. So, of course, we need some funding to fund this transformation. So it's rated over 1 billion zlotys. We've just completed the work on the planning for investment necessary for this transition. We have all the capex investments. We know how this transition should occur and will occur. So it's not only for the PKO bank. We have to really consider how to support energy companies, how to fund, how to pay for these huge investments. So we are looking at the cost of from 100 to 200 billion euro. So this expenditure will be 6 times higher than the capitalization of the biggest energy groups such as Orlen, Enea, Tauron, and PGE. So it's a huge task, which is not only about these groups, but also about Polish companies. We have prepared a platform for energy transformation for small and medium-sized enterprises. It's not only about funding, it's also about business plan and know-how. We need to provide them with some operational support to make sure that they build such an energy ecosystem to lower energy prices. So this is like an investment vehicle to be used in future. And thirdly, it's about support of expansion of Polish companies on foreign markets. So the influence of the foreign demand is huge on our economy. So in 60%, the international demand impacts GDP. It's a vehicle for economic growth. After Poland joined European Union, after 2004, 2.5 million of new jobs were created to provide service to manage this foreign demand. It's very important that we should support Polish businesses in terms of their foreign expansion. So we need to focus on this to build large entities. Draghi in his report is talking about this. One of the weaknesses listed, apart from the lower productivity, Europe versus the States, United States or Asia. So there are not enough large companies that are involved in advanced technologies. In Europe, there is no one business whose market capitalization would exceed 100 billion euro. In the United States, there are 6 technological companies whose capitalization is above 1 billion euro. So in Poland, we do not have enough large companies. The increase of productivity or the use of artificial intelligence is about, mainly concerns the large entities. So my role, our role, the bank's role is to support Polish companies abroad. We have 3 branches in Germany, Czech Republic and France. And next week we will be launching our new strategy, and we will be very quickly scaling up the branches, the corporate branches in the biggest export markets, to have this idea of this pan-European idea is supported and developed. Thank you very much. What about you? How do you perceive these new sources? I will try to be controversial. Well, we are saying that they are new, but they are not so new. We know that these are the technological shocks that have huge impact on the economic growth. The second element, the minister has mentioned it, is the geopolitical situation. So how do we compete in the global economy, and whether we are able to use some of the factors to obtain a better competitiveness, global competitiveness. So what is new in Dragi's report is not that he is focused on productivity. We know it's the foundation. It's not fundamental only for Poland, but for Europe, especially that if we look at these 3 main challenges, these mega trends, demography, this is a problem for Poland, for Europe, aging society, climate. I've got an interview from the Financial Times. This is a description. It's about China. China becomes the leader of the green transition. So if you say that transition is not necessary, you are wrong, because even China is interested in this concept. And number 3 is technology. And there is this growing technological gap. Europe had a Lisbon strategy agenda. It was launched in the year 2000. And the productivity in the last years after the pandemic in the United States, the raise was 17%. In the EU, it was 1%. Based on the Maciej's report, Poland is still doing quite well, just like Romania, but provided that the R&D expenditure is increased. Nowadays, this expenditure is 40% lower than the European EU average. And Minister has been stressing the private investment. So we need the change in paradigm in the context of this report. So we have to look, we should stress this special concept. What is the EU? Efficiency, effectiveness, depending on the competitiveness of the single European market. So on the one hand, we have to have internal competitiveness, but also have to have a good external one. So we need to consolidate such certain sectors, for example, telecommunication sector. So we have observed a change. The second element is about Maastricht criteria, fiscal rules. G2 powers, United States and China. If we look at the public debt, private debt, it's higher than in the EU. So where do you take $800 billion per year to pay for these extra investments? So there aren't any ideas so far. Some public funding, 20% has to be provided by the public funding, the rest by the private funding. And the third element of the paradigm, 1% of the EU budget in GDP. When we compare the federal American budget, it's about 20%. So the expectations in terms of the change in this paradigm are that something should occur, happen, not only in terms of these elements, these policies towards these specific challenges, climate, geography, geopolitics, or technology, but governance also has to be, multi-governments in the EU should be governed to make sure that the decisions are taken faster. You promised to be controversial. What was controversial in your contribution? Oh, it's a good question. Well, okay, controversy is as follows. It's not about the new sources of growth, about the new way of economic thinking of the aspects where all the dots have to be connected. Biggest misunderstanding is this energy.
Pierwszym ekonomistą w Polsce, który się zajął energią.
Yes, it's a huge misunderstanding. It's a buzzword that people focus on. I started dealing with green transition in 2006. Okay, so let's leave history behind. When I hear that people suddenly woke up and now think it's so important, it's not. The energy costs and the share in the economic turnover is 3%. So it's, if we improve it or correct it twice, we can save 1.5%. And this is how our GDP can increase. It will not trigger huge impulse. It must be there, but it doesn't have to be cheap. Now, in the we have had the cheapest energy ever. It's good that Minister Domański is still with us. Don't worry, Minister. Yes, the energy must be there. Governments so far kept on talking that it needs to be cheap, that we need coal, but they didn't provide investment in the energy sector. That's Polish problem. It all blends together. We are now at the cheapest point of the world's history when it comes to energy prices. In the 19th century, when industrialization began, energy was 4 times higher compared to the remuneration level. But it didn't stop the development. We need to deal with energy sources. We should not forget that transition is important, that investment is necessary, but it's not so important. The only threat is that we won't have energy, and we won't have it if we keep on discussing whether we should remove the assets from coal companies or not. So inertia. Whether it will come from windmills or other sources doesn't matter. Ewa Balcerowicz, Mr. Wojciechowski. I sometimes agree and sometimes disagree with Maciej. The point is not only about having energy, but about having cheap energy. According to Draghi's report, it's twice more expensive than in the US. Gas, for instance, is more expensive. Yes, but chemistry constitutes a minor share in the Polish economy. Yes, but Polish economy is related to the EU economy. Draghi's report mentions how to change modern technologies. There are three components. The first one is related to innovation, closing the technological gap. The second one is related to energy. And the third one, as mentioned by Minister Domański, is the external security related to the access of fossil fuels, which we have left behind, but Poland still imports 50% of fossil fuels. 25% is imported by China. But we are also dependent on the rare earth minerals indispensable for producing various components, let's say for electric vehicles. That's why we need to use friendshoring and nearshoring. Democracy matters for economy. And we also need to improve the investment ambience. We don't know whether democracy matters for economy. It's like dictatorship. Robinson wrote, sorry, both persons speaking at the same time. Let me only add that populism negatively affects the economy. I thought there were some topics that you would definitely agree about, but there are some examples of dictatorships. I will try to find good comparisons in Europe. What you mentioned in relation to energy, Dr. Balcerowicz. It's worth inviting Maciej to panels because he knows how to put a fly in the ointment. I do not agree with Maciej's approach. We cannot say gas only matters for the chemical industry. We shouldn't care about it. Yes, we should have gas, and we should care about its prices. Based on various research projects, we have to know that entrepreneurs complain about different things, not always the same ones, depending on how their situation changes. High energy prices are the major ailment, and it's followed by labor deficits and high labor costs. We must not say it's not important because they are supposed to invest, and we want them to invest. We also need to add obvious information that we are an industrialized country living based on industry. So the energy price matters. And there are some alarming pieces of information from investors who consider whether they should stay here or should leave Poland, because the transition cost is also going to be high. I will refer to innovation later on. Would you like to add anything? It's huge business for the bank. Bank should be concerned about it because it means loans. Okay, so the answer was given. I would like to add some details so as not to oversimplify the reality. The investment in energy transition is so huge that the banking sector in Poland will not bear the burden alone. We, as banks, wrote off around 70 billion zlotys in relation to the Swiss franc case. We have the lowest credit rate to GDP rate in the EU. So the transition challenge is about finding the funding source for green energy because international institutions are ready for it. However, when we want to shift from black or brown energy to green one, we need to remember it. We can trivialize the topic, but this is a huge injection of investment. A half of the National Recovery Plan will go to transition, and it needs to be used? Well, I think we could talk for hours about it, discuss the structure of public finance and decide whether there are any development constraints. The minister has just left, but in order for artificial intelligence to be rightly used, I would like to say that it's intuitively matches the topic of Polish economy development. Everybody talks about AI, so I'm not going to complicate the issue. I would like to refer to the Nobel Prize winner and how it matters for the development. AI uses the data, it nurtures itself on the data. We need to consider new and cross-sectional thorough technologies as well as their applications. The expenditure on AI nowadays, I remember the report, around 67% went to the USA, which is the leader, 20-something to China, and only 5% to Europe. But in Poland, it's just emerging, not development. So the development of AI happens outside the European borders. When we talk about Acemoglu, I don't remember if he wrote it together with Robinson, but it was a paper on whether AI will mean return to socialism. It was quite shocking. I read the paper published in Financial Observer, and it was about checking whether freedom was considered a kind of paradigm and price establishment that nobody can affect. The Nobel Prize winner asked the question, if, owing to AI tools, we know everything about the economy and the tools, perhaps the states will be able to affect the price. What is profitable? What should be produced? But Acemoglu said no. The liberal canon, it matters. This is business. And the use cases are abundant. We'll have more implementations in the medical sector, in transport and banking. This is where AI is used on a mass scale in all these areas. In detecting frauds in AML, in the area of making, scoring decisions. Over 50% of the decisions relating to mortgage loans are taken automatically, and the same applies to small and medium-sized companies. There are thousands of decisions taken weekly and thousands taken monthly. There are lots of implementations in customer service, 50 million of conversations based on bots. But we also use AI to simplify reality. We have Prosto application, meaning simply, to simplify the language at all levels of contact with customers. AI algorithms give hints what to do with the text to make it more understandable. There are plenty of use cases, and we'll have more of them. Just one more word. We've got huge potential in this area, and our people create international solutions. A guy from Kluczbork is a founder of OpenAI, the largest corporation. He is the creator and active developer of GPT chat. In this respect, in the area of science, we have strong competences and we can do more than we think we can. So we're closing the discussion, so the last word. Well, AI is another buzzword, and every generation has its trends now. We talk about chats and AI. The pivotal thing is not, we've been discussing here, to be ahead of innovation. Absorption of the technical amendments and evolutions in other countries is most important. Every big country, such as USA, is small compared to global economy and the pool of innovation. Some scientists, some innovators work in the US, others exist somewhere else. So at the corporate level, everything is outsourced. You employ consultants who implement procedures, you purchase machines, and so on and so forth. You also imitate others and implement internal changes. Absorption and imitation matter more than internal innovation. Internal innovation is the operating cost. Samsung needs to spend a lot on it, working in a sector where others spend a lot on internal innovation. In order to stand still, it needs to run very fast because the belt moves constantly. Once we have achieved technical limits, we do not spend too much on innovation as it cannot be improved further. Polish economy needs to respond to the buzzwords which cover the reality, meaning it should absorb the ideas which exist somewhere else and add its new items, rather than consider we need to rediscover America, because that's not the point. 98% will be the imitation of things invented elsewhere, and we need to do it quickly and effectively. Bad news, Maciej, we're not going to challenge Dr. Balcerowicz. I suppose we all agree, but I would like to add that although you can be happy about the information concerning the advancement of the banking sectors in terms of technology, and we feel it as customers of banks, I believe that in the entire economy, the situation is not so good. My colleague, Jan Hegmeier, carried out research which revealed that Polish investments are lower than those in the EU for the last 9 years and much lower than in our neighboring countries, Czechia, Slovakia, and Hungary. But another piece of bad news is that most investments go to buildings and walls, which is worse than the European average. Jan calculated that it's 70% of investment in Poland, which goes to buildings, but in the EU, where Draghi's report suggests that EU is lagging behind innovation compared to the USA, our situation is even worse, because in the EU it's 43% investment in structures, buildings, and we have 70%. Thank you very much. That's the moment for a round of applause. That's the end of our panel. We have 1 minute left on the clock, but we are out of time. Thank you very much for your patience and enjoy the rest of the Freedom Games. Thank you.
Jedzą kanapki z kawiorem.
Nadzwyczajna kasa.
Obrażanie dziennikarz telewizji polskiej.
Chodzi o działania polityczne.
Przygotowanie ofiar dla pedofilów.
Für Deutschland. Info. Włącz się na nowo.
Radość, nadzieja, życie, wyzwanie, pasja, pamięć, zaufanie, pokój, jedność. Słowa tworzą świat. Polskie Radio. Źródło wiarygodnych informacji.
Plany biznesowe powstają z marzeń. Dlatego nie ma dwóch takich samych firm. Jedni chcą działać na całym świecie. Innym cały świat mieści się w dłoni. Sukces biznesu to nie tylko jego wielkość, ale też szczęście, jakie przynosi ludziom. PKO Bank Polski.
Uwielbiam szycie w sieci. Wczoraj podszyłem się pod wnuczka, wieczorem uszyłem intrygę na apce randkowej, a dziś planuję grubymi nićmi szyte oszustwo z promocją. Tak się szyje.
Na oszustów są sposoby. Zapoznaj się z poradami ekspertów na niedajsiepodszyć.pl.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it. And how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihrer Ausreise.
Polskie Radio.
Jedynka.
Rodzina spółek Pelion to 12 tysięcy osób pracujących w ponad 300 spółkach w Polsce, Szwecji, Wielkiej Brytanii i na Litwie. Jesteśmy liderem w branży ochrony zdrowia. Od 1990 roku dbamy o długość i jakość życia. Pracować z nami możesz w jednym z 7 obszarów.
Dziś Nowy Jork, jutro Londyn. Za chwilę Paryż, Warszawa, Berlin. Na całym świecie kultura pulsuje rytmem. Wystarczy tylko włączyć dwójkę. Dwójka, Polskie Radio. Jesteś na miejscu.